The dungeon stank of rust and old screams. Rylan Kael descended the narrow stone steps, one hand on the damp wall, the other steady on the hilt of his sword. Above him, Draeger's fortress thrummed with life, kitchens roaring, minstrels tuning, nobles trading gossip before the king's winter feast. Down here, there were only torches and the work no one sang about. They brought her in just before dawn, the watch captain had said. A rogue Omega. Dangerous. His Majesty wants it handled quietly. It. Not her. Rylan had heard that word too many times. He reached the lowest level. The air grew colder, heavier. 2 guards straightened at the sight of him, fists clenching around their spears. Commander, the taller one greeted. We weren't expecting you personally. The king sent for his hound, Rylan said. Where is she? The guard jerked his head toward the farthest cell. The figure inside was small, half lost in shadow, kneeling on the stone with wrists hooked to an iron ring bolted into the floor. Chains clinked softly when she breathed. Rylan stepped closer. She killed a whole patrol, he asked. So the report says. The second guard scratched at his beard. We saw the bodies carted off ourselves, ripped to pieces. No survivors. Any witness statements? Rylan pressed. The tall guard shrugged. Captain brought her in bloody. That's enough for me. Enough for most men, Rylan thought. He'd made a life from being not most men. He moved to the bars. Open it. The guards hesitated. Sir, we were told. You were told I would handle it, Rylan cut in. Open the cell. The keys jingled as the shorter guard obeyed, swinging the iron gate inward. Rylan waited until the door clanged shut behind him before speaking. Look at me, he said. The girl raised her head. For a heartbeat, the weight of the fortress vanished. The torches dimmed, sound dropped away, and all that existed was that face, blood crusted along her cheekbone, split lip, one eye purpled and swollen. The other eye was clear, pale, unblinking, not wild, not broken, watching. Name? He asked. She swallowed. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse but steady. Mira. No pack name. No deference. Just Mira. Rylan's gaze slid to her wrists. The skin was rubbed raw where the manacles bit. Iron links coiled down to the floor ring, slick with her dried blood. He reached for the chain and the air seemed to tighten, the torches flaring then shrinking. He stilled. What did they tell you? She asked. That you murdered 6 of my men, he said. Her cracked mouth twitched. Your men are still alive. He frowned. You're sure? I saw them ordered away. New posts. New names. Mira's gaze flicked to the corridor. Dead on paper. Easier than questions. He didn't believe prisoners. That was rule 1. But something in her tone, a flat, exhausted certainty, slid under his armor. You understand the charge, he said anyway. Rogue Omegas are executed. No trial. Her laugh was a ghost of a sound. You don't need to explain your laws to me, Commander. I've been running from them since I was 12. He thought of the sealed writ in his pocket, the king's signet stamped deep into the wax. No council signatures. No witness mark. Why Draeger? He asked. If you're running, why come to the one fortress that never loses what it hunts? She held his gaze. Because prophecy said this is where the chains break. His jaw tightened. You're talking nonsense. Am I? Her eyes dropped pointedly to his empty forearm where any other warrior's wolf mark would be. They call you wolfless, don't they? The king's clever, loyal, little blade. Rylan's hand twitched. Be careful, girl. Mira leaned forward despite the chain's pull. Tell me you've never wondered why he favors you. Why he keeps you close when he despises weakness. He doesn't keep me because I'm weak. No, she agreed softly. He keeps you because he's afraid of who you'd be if you weren't his. The words slid into old cracks inside him he'd learned not to touch. He pulled the writ from his pocket and turned it over in his fingers, staring at the seal. He didn't need to read the lines. By order of the crown, the creature identified as Rogue Omega is to be executed at once. No public record. No remains. He'd obeyed a dozen such orders. Do you believe I killed your men? Mira asked quietly. I believe, Rylan said, that if you had, there would be bones, not a neatly signed writ. Silence stretched. From the corridor, the guards shifted their weight, murmuring to each other. One of them laughed. The sound hit Rylan wrong. How did you capture her? He called out without looking. Ambush near the west road, the tall guard replied. She'd already been hit with silver bolts by the time we got there. Put up a fight, though. Nasty thing. Rylan imagined 6 trained soldiers, crossbows ready, against one girl already bleeding. Nasty thing. I want the corridor cleared, he said. Sir. You heard me. Both of you. Go relieve the gate watch. The gate. That's not our post. It is now, Rylan snapped. Unless you'd like to explain to His Majesty why you ignored my command. Boots scuffed. A muttered curse. Then the heavy footfalls retreated up the stairs until only the drip of water and Mira's uneven breathing remained. You're sending away your witnesses, she murmured. That's not very loyal. Rylan exhaled slowly. I haven't decided what I am yet. He stepped closer, close enough to smell the iron and sweat on her skin. Up close, the flicker he'd seen before returned, fine threads of light under the grime at her temple, brightening then fading like coals under ash. Silver, he said under his breath. Mira's lips curved, not quite a smile. Your king's favorite bedtime monster. Every story he'd been told since childhood echoed. Silverbloods twist minds, topple alphas, burn packs from the inside out. Every mission he'd led to hunt whispers of their return. And yet, her shoulders shook with cold. Her wrists were torn. She was so thin the bones in her neck stood out like carved stone. If this was a monster, she was a very badly fed one. Rylan's fingers hovered over the iron cuff. This is a mistake, he muttered. Yes, she agreed. But not the way you think. He slid the key into the lock. It scraped, protested, then turned with a dull, final click. The shackle sprang open. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then power stirred, quiet, like a held breath. The torches along the corridor flared brighter, shadows jumping on the walls. The hairs on Rylan's arms rose. Mira drew her freed hand back, flexing her fingers as blood rushed to them. Pain flashed across her face, then steadied. You're late, she whispered. For what? He asked. For choosing. She leaned forward, bringing her mouth near his ear. Her voice dropped to a thread. Now they'll come for you too. Somewhere above, a bell began to toll. One strike, then another, alarm, not ceremony. Rylan straightened, every soldier's instinct roaring awake. What did you do? He demanded. Nothing, she said. Yet. The fortress wards felt my chains break. They know a silver is loose. She held out her other wrist, still shackled. You can lock me back up and pretend you tried, she said softly. Run back to your king and hope he forgives the delay. Her eyes met his, clear and unflinching. Or you can finish what you started. The bell tolled again, louder. For the first time in years, Rylan's certainty slipped. He saw 2 paths, one leading back to polished armor and the king's approving hand on his shoulder, the other into darkness with a girl every story called a curse. His grip tightened on the key. He chose. The second shackle fell open. Can you walk? He asked. Mira staggered to her feet, chains rattling as they slid from the floor ring. If you point me away from the throne, I'll manage. He moved to the door. There's an old smuggler passage behind the western cells. If the stones haven't collapsed, it leads past the lower wall. And if they have, she asked, then we improvise. She gave him a look that was almost amused. Prophecy was right. You really were wasted as a hound. They slipped into the corridor, footsteps quick and light. Behind them, the empty cell yawned, chains cooling on the floor. Rylan didn't look back. The fortress of Draga was waking up to alarms and shouted orders, unaware that its most loyal blade had just stepped off the path carved for him since childhood. He'd spent his life believing the crown had saved him from the ruins of his past. He was about to learn it had only forged his chains out of finer metal. The first alarm bell hadn't finished ringing when Rylan shoved Mira into the shadow of a crumbling archway. Stay close, he murmured. Boots thundered above them, a muffled storm rolling through the fortress levels. Orders barked. Metal clanged. Somewhere, a wolf howled in confusion. The sound cut short as someone snapped at it to stand down. Mira leaned against the wall, breathing hard. You weren't lying, she rasped. Your fortress really doesn't lose what it hunts. Today it might, Rylan said. If we move. They slipped along the narrow service corridor, past rusted hooks and old chains that had outlived the prisoners once fastened to them. At the end waited a heavy oak door, half rotten, half frozen in its frame. Rylan braced a shoulder against it and shoved. Wood groaned. Stone dust rained from the arch. It's sealed, Mira said. So are most of the things worth opening, he grunted. On the third push, the swollen wood tore free. Cold air slammed into them, carrying the faint scent of pine and snow and freedom. Behind the door, A tight stone passage tunneled into darkness, sloping up and away from the heart of the dungeons. Mira hesitated. How do you know about this? I helped bury it, Rylan said. He stepped into the tunnel and motioned for her to follow. He'd been 19 when the king first brought him here. Back then, the passage had been lined with smuggler crates and hidden weapons, the last veins of an old rebellion that refused to die. Rylan remembered the king's hand heavy on his shoulder, the pride in his eyes. You found their last escape route, Rylan, he'd said. You saved us from another war. Rylan had believed him. He'd overseen the sealing of the outer exit, ordered the inner door chained, watched stonemasons plaster over cracks until the smuggler path became just another rumor swallowed by Draeger's belly. Now he used the same path to betray the man who'd praised him. Mira's footsteps echoed softly behind him. You were his favorite even then, weren't you? She asked. He didn't answer. What did he say to you when you dragged your first rebel in chains to his feet? She pressed. Rylan's jaw worked. He said I had a talent for seeing weakness before it saw me. Did you feel proud? Her voice was quiet, not mocking. Yes, he said. The word tasted like rust. That was the worst part. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them to walk single file. Water dripped from the ceiling, slicking the stones. Twice, Rylan had to catch Mira when her bare feet slipped. You're freezing, he muttered. I've been colder, she replied. How long have you been running? Since I saw my village burn, she said. Silver hunters came at dawn. My mother told me not to scream when they put her on her knees. She paused. I screamed anyway. Rylan glanced back at her. In the dim light, her bruises seemed darker, her eyes brighter. And your father? He asked. Already dead, she said. Royal decree. He refused to give up the names of other Hizari. They said he was protecting monsters. He was protecting children like me. Rylan swallowed. You're Hizari, then? Last I checked, yes. She nudged him lightly with her elbow. You look disappointed. I thought every story you were told promised I'd have horns and claws. I'm more concerned with the part where your kind topples thrones. Only the rotten ones, she murmured. They walked in silence until the tunnel curved. Rylan spotted the faint shimmer of daylight ahead, dirty, but blessedly real. As they drew closer, Mira's hand brushed the wall. Faint silver light bled from her fingertips, tracing hairline cracks in the stone. Rylan stopped. What are you doing? Checking if your buried exit is still just buried, or if they walled it properly. She pressed her palm flat. The light intensified, then flickered, searching. A moment later, her knees buckled. Rylan caught her before she hit the ground. Her skin felt like ice under his hands. That stunt costs you? He asked. Everything costs, she whispered. The magic's there. Old. Thin. The king didn't like leaving loose edges, but stone remembers openings. Can you use it? Not without passing out. She smirked faintly. Unless you want to drag me the rest of the way. He studied the wall she'd touched. A faint outline of an archway glimmered where the rock looked slightly smoother, as if someone had smeared clay over a door and hoped nobody looked too closely. Rylan sheathed his sword and rolled his shoulders. Stand back, he said. He drove his boot into the outlined stones. Once. Twice. On the third kick, old mortar cracked. A slab shifted. Snow-scented air rushed in as the blocked arch gave way, crumbling outward onto a slope of scree and frost. Beyond lay a narrow gorge, its mouth opening to distant pines and a sky the color of hammered steel. Mira stared past him. For the first time since he'd seen her, something like real emotion pierced her calm, hunger, almost painful, for open sky. After you, Rylan said. She stepped through the gap, blinking against the raw light. Wind tugged at her filthy hair and torn burlap, raising gooseflesh along her arms. Rylan climbed out beside her and pulled the door slab back into place as best he could. From a distance, the ruined exit would look like just another collapsed rockfall. Where now? Mira asked. There's a hunter's path along the gorge edge, he said, pointing right. Leads to the lower forests. If we're lucky, we hit the tree line before they track us. And if we're not lucky, then we make our own luck. She huffed a small laugh. You talk like a man who's never been hunted. I've been hunted, he said. By worse things than your king. She tilted her head. Like what? Regret, he said lightly, and started up the path before she could answer. The climb was brutal. Loose stones slid underfoot. The gorge dropped away on their left in a dizzying plunge to jagged rocks and a trickling stream. Rylan kept Mira between himself and the wall, ready to grab her if she slipped. She slipped a lot. Your men chased you like this? He asked after she stumbled again. Not yours, she panted. Others. Not as disciplined. She shot him a sideways look. You should be proud. The king's hound nearly got me 3 times. That's not comforting. I'm not here to comfort you, she said, but there was a wry warmth to it. They reached a bend where the gorge widened slightly, forming a small ledge. Rylan halted, scanning the open sky. No hawks. No messenger ravens yet. He gestured for her to sit. We rest for a moment. We don't have. If you collapse on the edge of this cliff, you'll make a very small stain at the bottom, he said. Sit. She sank down with a sigh, hugging her knees. In the clearer light, he could see the outline of old scars under the fresh bruises, some thin and white, some puckered, the history of every capture and escape written on her skin. How many times have you been in chains? He asked quietly. Her jaw flexed. Enough to know how they sound in my sleep. Rylan sat opposite her, back against the rock. When I was 10, he said, surprising himself, I tried to run from the barracks. Mira's brows lifted. The king's pet tried to run. I didn't like the way the captain shouted, he said. Thought if I could reach the hill beyond the walls, I'd find my parents. The guard on duty caught me before I reached the gate. He beat you. He laughed, Rylan said. Said pups always wander. Then he took me to the king. He could still see the room, banners heavy on the walls, firelight on polished armor, the king seated casually on the edge of the war table as if he had all the time in the world. He didn't punish me, Rylan went on. He asked why I ran. I told him I wanted to see if the sky was bigger beyond the walls. He smiled faintly. He said, stay, and I'll show you the whole world. And did he? Mira asked. In his own way, Rylan said. He sent me on campaigns, made me commander, put a sword in my hand and a purpose in my head. But not a wolf, she murmured. No, he agreed. Not that. She studied him for a long moment. Do you ever wonder why? I assumed the gods forgot me. Maybe they were keeping you empty for a reason, she said. A vessel works better without cracks. Is that what I am? A vessel. For now, she said. Until you decide what you want to be instead. Below them, faint and distant, a horn sounded from the direction of Draga. Mira tensed. They found the empty cell. Good, Rylan said, standing. Let them search underground while we're already on the skyside. He offered her a hand. She took it without hesitation this time, letting him haul her to her feet. We'll need food, he said. Shelter. And information. She arched a brow. All from one convenient roadside inn. From men who owe me favors, Rylan answered. Being the king's hound has side benefits. And what will they think, she asked, when they see you've unclipped your leash? That the world is changing, he said simply. They moved on, following the narrow path toward the dark line of forest. Behind them, the fortress of Draga loomed against the mountain, bells tolling, ravens taking flight. For the first time since he'd sworn his oath, Rylan felt utterly, terrifyingly free. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like the moment just before a blade meets flesh, clean, inevitable, and irreversible. The forest swallowed them like a closing jaw. Pines towered overhead, their black needles whispering in the winter wind. Frost rimed the underbrush. Every breath came out in pale clouds. Somewhere deep in the gorge behind them, the faint thunder of boots echoed, distant, but growing. They've released the tracking wolves, Mira murmured. Rylan didn't ask how she knew. Her senses were sharper than any scout's. Silverbloods were born with instincts the rest of the world feared, and now that she was out of her chains, every shift in the air seemed to speak to her. We keep moving, Rylan said. They'll expect us to cut north toward the trade road. So we go south. Mira nodded and followed, though her legs trembled with every step. She'd barely eaten in days. He could see her strength thinning like smoke. They wound through the trees for nearly an hour before Rylan lifted a hand, stopping her. His posture sharpened, gaze scanning the tree line. What is it? She whispered. Birdsong stopped. The forest had gone unnaturally silent. Rylan's fingers slid toward the dagger on his belt. Mira stepped closer to him without thinking, her shoulder brushing his. Then, snap, a twig cracked to their left. Rylan shoved Mira behind him just as an arrow hissed from between the trees. It buried itself in the trunk behind them with a vicious shudder. Down, he snarled. Mira dropped, rolling into the brush as another arrow split the air. 3 figures emerged from the shadows, cloaked in leather and fur, their faces smeared with ash. They moved in a half-circle, tightening the ring around Rylan and Mira. Silver hunters. Not the king's men, worse. Freelancers. Fanatics. Men who'd butchered Mira's entire bloodline in the name of purifying the realm. The lead hunter grinned, teeth yellow in the cold. Well, he drawled. If it isn't the king's dog. And a pretty little silver prize. Mira stiffened behind Rylan. You shouldn't be here, Rylan said, voice low. These are royal grounds. You're trespassing. Funny thing, the hunter said. The king put a price on that girl's head big enough to buy a fortress. His grin widened. He never said it had to be collected inside his walls. Rylan drew his blade. You can walk away, he warned. We're not here for you, another hunter snarled. Hand over the girl and we'll let you crawl back to your master. Mira flinched, not at the insult, but at the word master. Rylan stepped forward. I don't crawl, he said. And I don't hand over children to butchers. The first hunter laughed. Children? Boy, she's more dangerous than you think. She's not the one you should be afraid of, Rylan replied. And then he moved. Steel flashed. Snow churned. The forest exploded into violence. Rylan blocked the first strike, pivoted, and slammed the hunter's head into a tree trunk. The man crumpled. The second lunged with a curved dagger, but Rylan twisted, caught his wrist, and drove an elbow into his jaw. The third hunter darted toward Mira. Mira! Rylan barked. She reacted on instinct, ducking under the attacker's arm. She wasn't trained, her movements were wild, panicked, but the silver inside her flickered, guiding her hands. She grabbed a fistful of snow and dirt and threw it into the man's eyes. He roared in pain. Rylan finished him with a single brutal kick. Two hunters lay unconscious. One crawled backward, clutching a broken nose. This isn't over, he spat. Every hunter in the north will smell her trail. Rylan grabbed him by the collar and hauled him close. Tell them, he said, voice like ice. Tell them if they want her, they'll have to get through me. He slammed the hunter's head against a rock. The man went limp. Silence fell again. This time, heavy. Loaded. Mira stared at Rylan, chest rising and falling fast. You could have let them take me, she said softly. You should have. They would have spared you. I know, he said. Then why? Rylan wiped the blood from his blade and slid it back into its sheath. Because I've followed every order since I was a child, he said. This is the first choice that's ever felt like it belongs to me. Her gaze softened, just slightly. Choices have consequences. Everything worth doing does. She didn't answer. Instead, she sank to her knees, exhaustion crashing over her all at once. Her hands shook uncontrollably. You're burning up, Rylan muttered, crouching beside her. I used too much, she whispered. The silver inside me, it's not settled. It takes strength just to hold it still. He hesitated only a moment before lifting her into his arms. She stiffened. Rylan, you're half dead on your feet, he said firmly. We won't make it a mile before the next hunting party finds us. She didn't protest again. As he carried her deeper into the forest, the tension in her body slowly eased, her head resting weakly against his shoulder. Rylan felt her breath warm against his neck, uneven but there. A strange protectiveness settled over him. It wasn't loyalty to the king. It wasn't duty. It was something heavier, older, something that had been waiting inside him for years without a name. Mira lifted her head faintly. Where are we going? A place they won't think to look, he said. A safe house. Whose? She rasped. Please don't say the king's. No, Rylan said. Someone who hates the king almost as much as you do. Her eyebrows twitched. That's reassuring. He huffed a faint laugh. Ahead, through the trees, the silhouette of a cabin came into view. Small, crooked, half buried in snow. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney. Mira whispered, barely audible, Rylan, if we go inside, you need to know something. He looked down at her. Her eyes glimmered silver beneath the exhaustion. They won't just hunt us, she whispered. They'll hunt everything you've ever cared about. Every friend. Every ally. Anyone who ever said your name. He paused at the foot of the porch. And you still want me to let you go? He asked quietly. She closed her eyes. No, she breathed. Rylan tightened his hold on her and pushed the cabin door open. Whatever waited inside, whatever hunted them outside, their fates were now bound. By choice. By danger. By the first spark of something neither of them yet understood. But the hunt had only begun. The cabin smelled of smoke, herbs, and the faint metallic tang of old blood. Rylan ducked inside with Mira in his arms. The room was small, a single table, a stone hearth, shelves jammed with jars and bundles of dried plants. Animal skins covered the floorboards. A kettle hissed over the fire. A crossbow string creaked. "Take one more step, boy, and I'll pin you to my wall." The voice came from the shadowed corner beside the hearth, rough, female, old enough to remember wars Rylan had only read about. "It's me," Rylan said. "Put it down, Lysa." A woman stepped into the firelight, crossbow already pointing at his heart. Her grey hair was braided back from a scarred face, one eye clouded, the other sharp as a hawk's. "Commander Kael," she said. "The king's favorite knife." Her gaze flicked to the half-conscious girl in his arms, and the color drained from her face. "And you've brought me a bomb." "Her name is Mira," Rylan said. "She needs help." "The only help a Silver needs is a clean death," Lysa snapped, "before the world burns around her." Mira stirred. "Your hospitality is underwhelming," she mumbled. Lysa's good eye narrowed. "She's awake." "Barely," Rylan said. "She's burning up. The hunters are behind us. And the king will follow. If you want to argue philosophy, wait until she's not dying in my arms." Lysa stared at him, crossbow steady. For a long, tight moment Rylan wondered if he'd miscalculated, if bringing Mira here had been the first real mistake of the day. Then Lysa swore under her breath and lowered the weapon. "Put her by the fire," she said. "And don't say I never did you any favors." Rylan laid Mira on a pile of furs near the hearth. Her skin was clammy, lips tinged blue. Every few breaths, a tremor rippled through her, as if something under her skin wanted out. Lysa knelt beside her, calloused fingers surprisingly gentle as she peeled back Mira's ruined sleeve. Silver veins pulsed faintly just beneath the surface. "Hizari," Lysa muttered. "I thought we'd buried the last of you." Mira cracked one eye open. "We're hard to kill." "Hard isn't the same as impossible," Lysa said. She rose and began pulling jars and bundles from the shelves, bitter roots, powdered bark, a vial of thick dark liquid that smelled like iron and rain. Rylan watched, restless. "What are you giving her?" he asked. "Something to keep her from burning through her own bones," Lysa said. "Your Silver sweetheart here is like a hearth with no chimney. Power builds until it has nowhere to go but back into her." "She said it was killing her," Rylan murmured. "It will," Lysa replied. "Unless someone grounds it." She poured the mixture into a cup and returned to Mira, supporting her head as she coaxed the liquid into her mouth. Mira gagged, then swallowed, shuddering. "That's foul," she whispered. "If you can taste it, you're not dead yet," Lysa said. Rylan knelt on the other side of the hearth. "Will she live?" he asked. Lysa's gaze flicked between them. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you finally do what you were born to do." Rylan frowned. "Meaning?" Lysa sat back on her heels, studying him like a puzzle she'd seen once, long ago. "You really don't know, do you?" she said. "Know what?" "That the king didn't pull you out of the ashes out of kindness," Lysa said. "He did it because prophecy told him a wolfless blade would cut his throat." Rylan's lips thinned. "I've had enough of prophecy for one day." "But prophecy hasn't had enough of you," she said, voice sharpening. "Sit down and listen, boy." He didn't sit, but he didn't walk out either. Lysa took that as permission. "Before Draga crowned your beloved tyrant," she began, "this land belonged to the Hizari, silver-blooded wolves who ruled not by fear, but by binding oaths, between Alpha and Omega, war leaders and healers, earth and sky." Rylan folded his arms. "The stories say they enslaved packs." "The stories say what victors want sung," Lysa snapped. "The truth is this: Silvers could sense lies, calm frenzy, break bloodlust. That frightened alphas who built their thrones on violence, so they rebelled." Her gaze dropped to Mira, whose breathing had evened slightly. "They slaughtered the Hizari in the name of freedom," Lysa went on. "Then they taught their children that Silvers were monsters. Easier that way." "And the prophecy?" Rylan asked. Lysa's mouth twisted. "When the last Silver Omega is bound beneath a tyrant's throne, the wolfless blade will break her chains. Together they will end the crown of blood." She shrugged. Old women love their dramatic phrases. Rylan felt something cold settle in his chest. "Wolfless blade," he repeated. "You think that means me?" Lysa's good eye glittered. "Your parents weren't random peasants, Rylan. They were low-blood Hizari sympathizers. The king ordered their execution, then adopted you into his army, kept you close, raised you on loyalty and half-truths." "Lies," Rylan corrected softly. Same thing in his mouth. Images spilled through his mind unbidden. His mother's face smudged in memory, the way the barracks captain had refused to answer questions about the plague, the king's hand on his shoulder promising him a place in the world. A blade cuts best when it doesn't know whose throat it's meant for. He sank onto a stool, the weight of it all pressing down. If this is true, he said, why tell me now? Because you've already broken her chains, Lysa said simply. The wards will have whispered it across the realm. Hunters will come. The king will come. You've stepped onto the path, whether you meant to or not. Rylan rubbed a hand over his face. You want me to, what? March into the capital and cut him down. I want you alive, Lysa said. And I want her alive. Her gaze hardened. Without an anchor, she'll burn herself out in months, weeks, if she keeps flaring like she did today. Anchor. Rylan repeated. Silver power needs somewhere to go, Lysa said. Someone to flow through. A vessel strong enough not to shatter. A wolf-less commander, say, built on discipline instead of instinct. He stared at her. You're suggesting I let her use me. I'm suggesting you survive together instead of dying beautifully apart, Lysa said dryly. When she touches you, the silver in her steadies. You didn't notice. Rylan thought of the dungeon, the way the torches had calmed once his hand had closed around Mira's wrist, how her breathing had evened as he carried her through the forest. He had noticed. He just hadn't named it. Bonding is not a light thing, he said. I didn't say mate, Lysa snapped. I said anchor. Power bond. You hold the current, she stops burning. Her gaze softened, just slightly. What you become to each other beyond that is your business. On the furs, Mira stirred again. I'm lying right here, she muttered. In case you both forgot. Lysa snorted. Then sit up and join the conversation, child. Mira pushed herself upright with obvious effort. Sweat had plastered hair to her forehead, but the blue tinge had faded from her lips. The potion was working. How much did you hear? Rylan asked. Enough to know you're being offered a terrible bargain, she said. Bind yourself to a hunted creature and die early, or don't bind yourself and watch her die instead. Her eyes met his, silvered and weary. I don't want another chain, she said softly. Not even a kind one. You wouldn't be chained, Rylan said. We'd be linked. That's a poetic chain, she replied. He almost smiled. Lysa slapped her knees and stood. Whether you bond now or later, you'll need answers first. Sleep. Eat. When dawn comes, you decide if you're running for your lives or marching to your deaths. She shuffled to her narrow bed in the corner and lay down with her back to them, as if that settled the matter. Mira sank back onto the furs, eyes half closed. Do you regret it yet? She whispered. Freeing you? Rylan asked. Yes. He listened to the crackle of the fire, the wind against the shutters, the faint, steady beat of her heart. No, he said. Not yet. She exhaled, something like relief in the sound. Outside, the wind shifted. Far away, a horn blew, 3 short notes that made Lysa stiffen under her blanket. They've crossed the river, she said. Your king's riders. Rylan's hand fell automatically to his sword. The world felt smaller suddenly, the cabin a fragile shell against an oncoming storm. He lay down on the floor beside the hearth, between Mira and the door, and stared at the rafters until his eyes burned. Prophesies, bloodlines, anchors, those could wait for dawn. For tonight, there was only one truth he could hold to. If the king wanted the girl in chains again, he would have to step over Rylan's body to do it. Lysa woke them before dawn with a boot to Rylan's ribs. Up, she snapped. You've got visitors. Rylan bolted upright, hand already on his sword. Mira jerked awake with a hiss, eyes flashing silver before she caught herself. Riders? Rylan asked. Not yet, Lysa said, moving to the shutter and prying it open a finger's width. Smoke on the eastern ridge. Too much for hunters. Not enough discipline for the king's men. Rebels, Mira murmured. The loud kind, Lysa agreed. They've picked up your trail. Congratulations, children. Everyone wants you. Rylan reached for his cloak. We leave. Too late for clean exits, Lysa said. You can run into the king's jaws or let the rebels argue over who gets first bite. She glanced back at them. Personally, I'd rather have a seat at the argument. Mira pushed herself to sitting, grimacing as stiff muscles protested. You trust them? I don't trust anyone who wants power, Lysa said. But I trust what they want. And right now, they want to keep your king from getting his hands on you. She nodded at Rylan. That aligns with your suicidal plan, doesn't it, Wolfless? Rylan didn't like it. But horns had echoed through the night more than once. The king's riders were close. He looked at Mira. We go. We watch. We don't promise anything. She chuckled weakly. You really are learning. They hadn't gone half a mile from the cabin when the rebels found them. Arrows thudded into tree trunks ahead and behind, warning shots, close enough to stir fear but not blood. Men and women stepped out from between the pines, leather armor muted by strips of cloth, faces painted in dull blacks and grays. Commander Kael, a woman called. Her voice was rough but steady. Drop the sword. If we wanted you dead, you'd already be mulch under that spruce. Rylan recognized her. Captain Irina, he said slowly. I thought you died at Blackwater Ford. Rumors of my death have been doing good work for years, Irina said. She was tall, dark-haired, with a scar that split her lower lip. Her eyes flicked past him to Mira. She's smaller than I expected. She's tired, Mira said. Not small. A few rebels snorted. Irina's gaze sharpened. Pretty bold for someone whose head the king wants decorating his gates. Boldness or stupidity, Mira said. Depends who's telling the story. Irina smiled faintly. I like her. She lowered her bow slightly but didn't put it away. The forest is about to be crawling with royal scouts. You're coming with us. Rylan's grip tightened on his sword. We're not. Suggestions, Commander, Irina cut in. We'll be entertained once we're somewhere that isn't about to be trampled by the crown's cavalry. She jerked her chin toward the trees. Move. Rylan met Mira's eyes. She gave a tiny shrug, as if to say, we were getting hunted anyway. Fine, he said. Lead the way. The rebel camp was hidden in a knife-cut canyon, accessible only by a narrow path that doubled back on itself 3 times. Smoke from cook fires was carefully channeled through rock crevices to disperse before it reached the surface. Men and women in patched armor watched as Rylan and Mira entered, their gazes sharp and measuring. Some recognized Rylan. He heard his name whispered with equal parts anger and reluctant respect. The king's hound, someone muttered. And a silver, another breathed, awe and fear mixed. Irina led them into the largest tent, its walls reinforced with old banners stripped of their crests. Inside, a table had been carved with rough maps, valleys, roads, fortresses, all marked with burnt circles and crosses. At the table stood a man built like a felled oak, broad shoulders, thick beard gone more grey than black. One arm ended at the elbow in a leather-capped stump. Kael, he rumbled. Never thought I'd see you walk into my camp without chains on your wrists. Rylan bowed his head slightly. General Koren. Last I heard, you were rotting in the royal dungeons. Koren smiled without humor. Last you heard, you were still licking the king's boots. Times change. His gaze slid to Mira. The air in the tent shifted, charging. So, he said. This is the infamous Silver. Mira straightened, shoulders squared despite the tremor in her limbs. Mira, she corrected. Not this. Koren studied her openly, like a weapon he was considering buying. You killed an entire patrol, he said. Heard that story myself, she replied. It's a good one. Shame it's false. False or not, Koren said, the king believes it. That's what matters. Rylan stepped between them without fully thinking. We didn't come here to be catalogued. Koren raised a brow. You came here because you had nowhere else to run. Let's not pretend this is a negotiation between equals, Commander. Opportunity, Koren said. He tapped the painted map. The king's armies are stretched thin, keeping his subjects afraid. His best commander, his eyes flicked to Rylan, just walked off the leash, and a living silver-blooded Hizari fell into our laps. His gaze hardened. With the 2 of you, we could break him. The words hung heavy in the air. Listen, Koren continued, voice growing rough with conviction. We've been bleeding men for years. Striking, retreating, hiding. But with her power, we could make every alpha in his service kneel. With your knowledge of his tactics, Kael, we could cut out his heart in one strike. Rylan's mouth went dry. It was almost exactly what he'd told himself he wanted. A way to stop the king, to end the purges, to make all the blood mean something. But the way Koren looked at Mira made his skin crawl. You'd be asking her to use power that's tearing her apart, he said. Then we use it quickly, Koren said. The world doesn't change without sacrifices. Mira laughed once, a short and bitter sound. You mean without sacrifices like me? Koren's jaw tightened. You're the last of a line that nearly enslaved wolves. That line healed your wars and bound your oaths, she shot back. And you repaid them with fire. The tent temperature seemed to drop. Irina stepped in. Enough history, she said. We're here because we want the same thing. Your king on his knees and his purge ended. We're not asking you to die for us, Mira. We're asking you to fight for every Omega chained in a cellar right now. Rylan felt Mira falter at that. Her gaze dropped, lashes trembling. I didn't say I wouldn't fight, Mira whispered. I said I won't be caged again. Koren leaned on the table, hands braced. What if the cage buys freedom for thousands? Is your comfort worth more than their lives? Rylan stepped forward, anger rising hot in his chest. You talk about cages very casually from behind a map, General. Koren's eyes snapped to him. Careful, Kael. No, Rylan said. You brought us here to use us. Fine. Say that. Don't dress it as charity. And don't talk about sacrificing her like she's a piece on your board. Mira's fingers brushed his sleeve in a small, startled gesture. He ignored the way it jolted through him. Silence fell. Finally, Koren exhaled slowly. You want honesty? Here it is. He looked straight at Mira. We will use you. Because if we don't, he will. And he will not ask. He will take. At least here, you get to choose which lives your power saves. Mira's throat worked. And if I choose not to give it to either of you? Koren's face closed. Then you condemn every village he burns looking for you, he said. You condemn every Omega he drags into his cells to bait you out. And you will watch it happen from whatever hole you bury yourself in. The words hit harder than any blade. Mira swayed. Rylan stepped closer, steadying her with a hand at her back. Koren nodded as if the matter were settled. You'll stay here. Rest. We plan. When the time comes, you go where I send you, do what I ask. That's the price of our protection. Irina's gaze flickered with regret, but she said nothing. A chill crept over Rylan's spine. This was not sanctuary. It was a new kind of leash. We'll think on it, Rylan said. Koren's lips twisted. You don't have that luxury. The King's riders will hit this region in a day. The moment they realize you're not alone, they'll burn everything. His gaze hardened. You either stand with us at his throat, or you run and let the rest of us die holding him back. He snapped a hand at Irina. Find them a tent. Keep her under guard. No one approaches without my word. Under guard. Mira repeated quietly. For your safety, Koren said. Rylan heard the lie in every syllable. As they were led out, Mira whispered, different chains. Same iron. He squeezed her shoulder. Not if I can help it, he murmured back. And in that moment, he knew, whatever war he ended up fighting, it wouldn't be for a king, or for a general, or for a prophecy carved on someone else's altar. It would be for the bruised, stubborn girl at his side. And the right for her to never bow, to throne or rebel, ever again. They gave them a tent near the canyon wall and called it protection. Rylan knew a cell when he saw one. 2 rebels stood outside at all times, silhouettes cut sharp against the firelight. Inside, the canvas smelled of damp wool and old smoke. A single cot, a thin blanket, and a stool made up the accommodations. Mira sat on the cot with her knees drawn up, fingertips tracing the weave of the fabric like she was mapping escape routes. How many chains does that make now? She asked quietly. Not counting the invisible ones. Rylan leaned against the center pole, arms folded. These ones don't lock, yet. He couldn't argue. Outside, the camp murmured and clanked, sharpening blades, low muttering over maps, the scrape of boots on stone. Somewhere, someone laughed. It sounded brittle. Mira's eyes flicked to him. You're thinking. I do that sometimes. Loudly, she said. Picture it from my side, Rylan. The king wants to kill me. The rebels want to use me until I break. Somewhere in between, Lysa wants to turn you into my lightning rod. You say that like it's the worst idea, he said. She tilted her head. You want to be an anchor for something that burns people from the inside. I've carried worse, he said. Then, more honestly, I don't know. Yet. Before she could answer, the flap lifted. Irina ducked in, dust-smudged and tired. General wants you, she said. Both of you. Mira's mouth quirked. What are we today? Guests or assets? Irina didn't smile. That depends how well this goes. They brought them to the canyon's central basin. Torches ringed the open space, flames licking at the cold air. A line of bound men knelt in the dirt, royal scouts, judging by their half-torn uniforms. Their wrists were tied behind their backs, necks bowed. Koren stood at the edge of the ring, cloak snapping in the wind. When Rylan and Mira approached, he gestured at the prisoners. His Majesty's eyes, he said. We caught them shadowing the ridge. Rylan's jaw clenched. He trained some of those men. What are you planning? He asked. A demonstration, Koren said. His gaze slid to Mira. Your friend here needs to understand what she can do. We need to know how far her power reaches. Mira's shoulders stiffened. I'm not breaking men for your amusement. It's not amusement, Koren said. It's war. Use your silver to stop their wolves from shifting. If you can do that in battle, entire companies will fall without us spilling blood. Their blood, she said. Not mine. They're alive right now because I ordered them taken breathing, Koren said flatly. Don't pretend you're sparing saints. Rylan stepped closer to Mira. You don't have to do this. Her eyes met his. Something like resignation flickered there. If I don't, she murmured, they'll just find a uglier way to test me. At least this way, I choose how. She walked into the circle. The prisoners looked up, some with baffled fear, others with raw hatred. One spat at her feet. Traitor's whore, he snarled. Mira's expression didn't change. Lift their heads, she said quietly. Koren nodded. Rebels yanked the prisoners upright. Mira closed her eyes. Rylan felt it before he saw it, the air tightening, the hairs on his arms rising. Threads of cold brushed his skin, tasting like metal and storm. Mira's lips moved, shaping a word that didn't belong to this century. Silver light slipped from her fingers and slid over the kneeling men like fog. Their backs arched. Their eyes rolled white. Half-shifts tried to burst through their skin, bones cracking, jaws elongating, then froze. Every wolf caught mid-change, trapped between forms. Panting, whimpering, helpless. Mira's whole body shook. Enough, Rylan snapped. Koren's eyes gleamed. Hold them, he ordered. Mira's knees buckled. Rylan lunged forward, catching her just before she hit the dirt. Her pulse hammered under his hands. Too fast, too wild. Silver flared at her temples, then sputtered. Let them shift back, she whispered. Koren hesitated. Rylan glared at him. She said enough. The general jerked his chin. Cut their bonds. Rebels sliced the ropes. The scouts collapsed fully human, coughing and sobbing, their bodies steaming in the cold night. Mira sagged against Rylan, breath shallow. He lifted her easily, cradling her against his chest. She nearly killed herself for your test, he said. Koren didn't flinch. And now we know what she can do. 3 nights from now, we hit Draga. With her locking down his elite, the king won't know what hit him. And when she collapses, Rylan asked, you patch her up and drag her to the next battlefield. If that's what it takes, Koren said. We don't get revolutions without dead heroes. Funny, Rylan said softly. I thought we were fighting so fewer people had to die for kings and generals. For a moment, something flickered in Koren's eyes. Then it was gone. Take her back to the tent, he said. Guard stays doubled. No one sees her without my word. The words sounded too familiar, too royal. Rylan turned away before his temper did something stupid and permanent. Back in the tent, Mira lay on the cot, skin slick with sweat, silver dimmed to a dull thread under her skin. I told you, she murmured, voice raw. Every time I push, I burn. And every time, someone else cheers, Rylan said. He wrung out a cloth in a basin and pressed it to her forehead. She caught his wrist weakly. This isn't your burden, she whispered. Too late, he said. I picked it up when I opened your chains. Her fingers tightened. You'll drown in it if you're not careful. Then anchor me back, he said. She huffed a breath that might have been a laugh. You're really leaning into this anchor metaphor. It's all Lysa's fault, he said. She put the idea in my head. As if conjured by the name, the flap rustled and a hunched shape slipped inside between the guard's shadows. Lysa straightened, pulling back her hood. Snow dusted her shoulders. You move like a drunk elk, wolfless, she grumbled. I followed your trail with my eyes half blind. Koren's sentries barely noticed me. You came all this way? Rylan asked, startled. I came because the ward screamed, she said sharply. Your silver girl lit them up twice in one day. The mountains won't stay quiet long. Her gaze fell on Mira. Lines deepened around her mouth. She's burning faster than I feared. So fix it, Rylan said. Lysa's stare cut to him. I told you already. She needs stone. Old stone. places where silver was sung into the rock centuries ago. There's a sanctuary east of here, half-buried Hizari Temple. If she rests there, the land itself will drink some of the power out of her. And you conveniently mention this now, Rylan demanded. I mentioned it before you let rebels drag you off by the collar, Lysa snapped. You weren't listening. Mira's eyes slitted open. Sanctuary, she whispered, echoing stone. I've dreamt of it. Dreams or not, you won't reach it if Koren keeps you locked up and flaring on command, Lysa said. She turned to Rylan. You want her alive? Get her out. Tonight. Past doubled guards and an entire rebel camp, he said dryly. Simple. You've broken royal sieges, Lysa said. You can slip through one overconfident canyon. A shadow moved outside. Irina's low voice murmured something to the guards. A moment later, she slipped into the tent. I thought you were sleeping, she said to Lysa. I thought you were smarter, Lysa shot back. Irina ignored the barb and looked at Rylan and Mira. For the first time since they'd arrived, her expression was unguarded. You're planning something, she said. Rylan didn't bother lying. Koren will kill her by inches. The king will kill her quicker. I'm not handing her to either. Irina's jaw tightened. If you go, you weaken our chances. If we stay, he turns her into the thing your enemies already fear, Rylan said. You want to build a better kingdom or just a different cage? Silence stretched. Outside, the wind moaned against the canvas, carrying faint echoes of men arguing in the distance. Finally, Irina cursed under her breath. There's a goat path on the canyon's north wall, she said. Old Smuggler's Trail. Our sentries are lazy there. If you leave in the next hour, you might make the ridge before dawn. You'd risk Koren's wrath, Rylan asked. I'd risk his temper over watching him break another weapon and calling it freedom, she said. She met Mira's eyes. If you live long enough to topple him, do it in a way that doesn't replace his face with someone just like him. Mira's lips curved faintly. No promises. But I'll try. Irina nodded once and ducked back out. Lysa grunted. You have your path. I'll meet you at the ridge with supplies. Don't dawdle. Rylan moved fast. He packed what little they'd been given, blanket, water skins, a heel of stale bread. He helped Mira sit up, then stand. Her legs trembled but held. Can you walk? He asked. Far enough, she said. Fear's an excellent stimulant. He brushed the back of his fingers against her temple. Silver flickered there, faint but alive. Time to steal you from your saviors, he said. She smiled, small and sharp. Again. They slipped out the rear of the tent, hugging the canyon wall. The camp's main fires were clustered near the center. The edges lay in deeper shadow. A few sentries paced, but their eyes were turned outward, toward imagined royal raids, not inward, where betrayal moved on quiet feet. At the north wall, the rock sloped, rough and narrow, marked by the faint scarring of old hoofprints. The goat path, Mira murmured. Stay close, Rylan said. They climbed. By the time they reached the ridge, the camp was a scatter of distant embers below. The sky above them was bleeding from black to indigo. Lysa waited by a leaning boulder, a small pack at her feet. There, she said, pointing east. 2 days hard travel. You'll know the sanctuary when the stone starts singing at her touch. Mira shivered. And if it doesn't? Then I was wrong, Lysa said. And you're both dead anyhow. So it hardly matters. Rylan looked out over the jagged horizon. Somewhere beyond those teeth of rock lay an old temple that might drink the fire out of a Silverblood and leave her alive instead of ash. He took Mira's hand. Sanctuary, he said. On our terms, not theirs. She squeezed back, silver in her eyes matching the first edge of dawn. They turned their backs on king and rebels alike, and began the climb toward the place where their war would truly start. By the second day, Mira's steps had turned silent. Not from stealth, she was simply too tired to waste energy. Her breath came thin, white ghosts in the mountain air. Rylan watched her from the corner of his eye as they picked their way along a narrow ledge, snow crunching underfoot. We stop soon, he said. We've stopped 3 times already, she murmured. The king doesn't get tired. His riders don't either. His horses do, Rylan said. And his wolf-blooded can't move as fast at this altitude. That's why we're here. She didn't answer, but when the ledge widened into a shelf of broken rock, she didn't argue when he guided her to sit. The landscape spread out beneath them, jagged peaks, valleys filled with fog, a river cutting silver through the distance. No banners yet. No smoke columns. Rylan dug in his pack and handed her a strip of dried meat. "Chew," he said. She made a face but obeyed. "If I survive all this," she said around the tough bite, "I'm never eating meat like this again." "What will you eat then?" he asked. "Bread that isn't stale," she said. "Fruit that doesn't taste like regret. Maybe something sweet. Once." He smiled faintly. "Ambitious dreams. I'm learning from you." He looked away before she could see how that landed. "Any sign?" he asked after a moment, nodding toward the mountains ahead. "Of your sanctuary?" She closed her eyes and let her hand drop to the rock beside her, fingers splaying against the cold stone. For a long heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, faintly, a hum. Rylan felt it through his boots, a soft vibration, like distant music played underwater. Mira's eyes snapped open. "There," she whispered. "Do you feel it?" "Yes. It's stronger farther east," she said, staring at the serrated horizon. Like something is calling back." He offered his hand. "Then we keep answering." By late afternoon, the path vanished entirely. The mountain face rose in a sheer wall of black stone, veined with white quartz. Snow clung in pockets, wind carving small flurries off the edges. The hum underfoot had grown stronger, a low, constant thrumming that made Rylan's teeth ache. Mira stopped. "It's here," she said quietly. Rylan studied the cliff. "I don't see a way in." "That's because you're looking with your eyes," she murmured. She placed both palms flat against the stone. Silver light seeped from her skin into the rock. At first it was thin, like water in cracks. Then it grew, spreading in branching lines, tracing patterns beneath the surface. The mountain answered. A deeper pulse rolled through the stone, vibrating up Rylan's spine. Lines of pale metal ignited across the cliff face, forming a massive circle etched with symbols he didn't recognize. Mira swayed. "Mira. I'm fine," she lied. The circle flared once, then slowly dimmed, leaving only faint glowing outlines. With a grinding sigh, the center of the circle sank inward. A doorway opened, exhaling a breath of air that smelled of dust, cold, and something older than the kingdom itself. Mira sagged. Rylan caught her, feeling her heart pound out a frantic rhythm. "Inside," she muttered, "before it changes its mind." He helped her through. The Hizari sanctuary was more cavern than temple. Pillars of rough stone rose from floor to ceiling, carved halfway into the suggestion of wolves, women, and swirling constellations. Cracks in the roof let in thin spears of light. At the far end, a shallow basin had been carved directly into the rock, filled with water so still it looked like glass. The hum was louder here, but softer. Not a warning. A welcome. Mira's shoulders dropped, tension draining as if something in the air recognized her. Rylan guided her to sit by the basin. She dipped her fingers into the water. Ripples shivered out, carrying faint glimmers of silver. "It remembers us," she whispered. "Your people," Rylan said. "Our mistakes," she corrected. "And what was worth saving, even after everything burned." He knelt opposite her. "What now?" "Now we see if Lysa was right," she said. She cupped water in her palm and pressed it to the inside of her wrist. The silver under her skin flared, then stretched, threading into the droplets. Slowly, the brightness dulled. Rylan leaned forward. "What's happening?" "The stone is drinking it," Mira said. "Like it used to, when my ancestors cleaned themselves after a war. They never kept all the power. The land took some, so it wouldn't rot them from the inside." "How much can it take?" he asked. Her smile was tired. "Let's hope enough." She reached her wet hand across the basin, palm up. "Give me yours," she said. He hesitated. "Will it hurt?" "Yes," she said honestly. "But less than what's coming if we don't do this." He laid his hand in hers. Her skin was cold and damp. When her fingers curled around his, the hum seeped into his bones. "Close your eyes," she murmured. He did. There was a moment of nothing. Then, heat. Not burning, not yet, but potent and wild, like standing too close to a forge. It threaded from her hand into his arm, up toward his shoulder, then down again, searching. He gritted his teeth. "Mira. Breathe," she whispered. "Don't fight it. Hold it." He imagined himself as Lysa had said, a vessel. Not the source, not the fire. Just the shape that held it. The heat settled in his chest, throbbing in time with his heartbeat. Pain edged its way in, but it was a pain he could bear, a weight added to armor, not a knife in flesh. Across from him, Mira exhaled. The silver in her veins dimmed, just a shade. The frantic stutter of her pulse evened. It's working, she said softly. Some of it is sitting in you instead of chewing through me. Lucky me, he rasped. She huffed a breath of laughter. You volunteered. He opened his eyes. Her pupils were blown wide, but the fever had left her cheeks. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked, not fragile, just tired. Again? She asked. He nodded. They repeated the process, water, skin, silver turning from lightning strike to slow embers shared between them. Each time, the sanctuary's hum changed slightly, as if adjusting, accepting. By the third round, Rylan's muscles trembled. That's enough, Mira said, pulling her hand back. Any more and you'll fall over. I've stood through worse, he said. Don't, she replied quietly. You're not allowed to die for me. His brows lifted. Am I not? No, she said. You die with me or after me. Those are the only options. There was no flippant tone, no joke, just simple, brutal sincerity. He held her gaze. Then I suppose we should keep you alive, he said. A ghost of a smile touched her mouth. Outside, the wind shifted. Faintly, too faint for ordinary ears, horns sounded. Mira's head snapped toward the doorway. They're closer than I thought. Rebels or the king? Rylan asked. Both, she said. The mountain routes narrow. They'll drive each other up the same roads. They'll kill each other to get to you, he said. To us, she corrected. You freed me. You can't be separated from this now. He pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the echoing ache where her power coiled inside his chest. So we don't wait for them to come to the door, he said. We decide how this ends. You want to march back into Draga, she said slowly. With half the king's army and an angry rebel force between us and the throne. Yes, that's insane. Probably, he agreed. She stood too, less unsteady now, though exhaustion still clung to her. Then we need a plan, she said. One that doesn't end with you as a heroic corpse and me as a story villains tell their children. He stepped closer to the basin, looking down at their reflections. Two faces stared back, one scarred, one bruised, both marked now with the faintest halo of silver light. Good, he said. Because I'm done dying for crowns and banners. He met her eyes in the water. If I'm going to risk my life, he said, it will be for the chance that no one ever chains an Omega in a dungeon again. Silver or otherwise. Mira's throat worked. Then we go back, she whispered. Not as hound and prisoner. Not as weapon and wielder. As something else. Partners, he said. Her fingers brushed his. Partners, she agreed. They turned away from the water and the stone that remembered old blood, and toward the doorway where wind and distant war horns waited. The sanctuary had given them what it could. The rest would be paid in steel, in choices, and in whatever the wolfless blade and the rogue Omega decided their story should become. By the time they reached the outer ridge overlooking Draga, dawn was a red wound on the horizon. Below them stretched two armies. On the western slope, the king's riders, metal gleaming like 1,000 cold suns, banners snapping with the wolf sigil of the crown. Their formation was near perfect, shields interlocked, archers in staggered rows, wolves pacing at the front with bared teeth. On the eastern slope, Corrin's rebels, disordered but burning with the wild fury of people who had lost too much to kneel. Smoke curled from signal pyres, and the canyon echoed with shouted commands. Between them, a single valley led straight to the fortress, straight to the dungeons where Mira had nearly died, straight to the throne that had forged Rylan's chains. Mira stood shoulder to shoulder with him on the ridge, her hair whipping in the mountain wind. The sanctuary's work showed in the calm glow of her eyes, no frantic flickering, no fever, only a steady pulse of collected power. What now? She murmured. Rylan scanned both armies. They'll tear each other apart trying to reach you. And we can't let either side win, she said softly. Not the king who hunts us. Not rebels who want to use me until I burn. No, he said. This ends with us. No one else. She looked at him then, really looked, as if searching for hesitation. Are you sure? She asked. No, he said honestly. But I'm done letting other people decide who I am. The thing she gave him in return wasn't a smile. It was something fiercer. They moved down the slope before anyone saw them. Rylan led them along a goat trail hidden behind an outcrop of stone slick with frost. The king's men were too disciplined to break formation. The rebels were too focused on their enemy to notice shadows moving at the valley's edge. When they reached the valley floor, Mira stopped. The air shifted. Silver seeped from her fingertips, flowing into the ground, threading through roots and dead grass. Trails of light spread under the earth like veins being drawn in real time. The wolves on both sides froze, ears flattening. The wind stilled. Rylan swallowed. "Are you calling them?" Mira said. "Not to attack, to listen." A tremor rippled through the valley as if an invisible bell had been struck. Wolves from both armies whined, their hackles lifting. Then, impossibly, they lay down. Every wolf, every alpha beast, every royal warhound. Silence crashed over the battlefield. Rylan stared at her. "You turned their wolves." Mira trembled. "Only for a moment. Enough to stop them killing each other. Enough to make them hear." "Hear what?" She lifted her chin. "Our terms." Rylan was the first to notice them. His roar carried across the valley. "Mira. Kael." The king's cry followed a heartbeat later. "Rylan." Men surged forward in both directions. But without their wolves, the alphas were unbalanced, off-tempo, confused, wary. Rylan and Mira stood alone in the center of the valley, their shadows stretching long across the frostbitten earth. The king reached them first, armor shining like a lie. "Rylan," he said, voice thick with betrayal. "You ungrateful dog. I raised you. I made you. You used me," Rylan said. "You killed my parents. Then you dressed it in charity." The king stiffened. "You were told those lies by rebels and monsters." "No," Rylan growled. "I was told by memory. And by the girl you tried to burn." Mira stepped forward, silver light haloing her hair. "I am not your weapon," she said. "Not your fear. Not your bone to break." Rylan arrived next, breathing hard. His soldiers fanned out behind him, bows half drawn. "Girl," Rylan snapped, "this isn't the time to posture. Take down the king, and we rebuild the realm." "At what cost?" Mira asked. "You want me to break his armies, then break myself to keep you in power." Rylan's jaw clenched. "We need you." "No," she said. "You need control." She lifted one hand. Shadows of silver rose around her, just a shimmer, enough to make every soldier flinch backward. "I'm done being someone's leash," she said. "I'll fight with anyone who stands for the unchained. But I will not serve kings, rebels, generals, or gods." She looked between them. "Choose now. Peace, or slaughter." The valley held its breath. The king sneered. "She's bluffing. Take her." Half his soldiers stepped forward, and collapsed as their wolves bucked violently inside them, rejecting the order. Men screamed, convulsing as their beasts refused to obey. Rylan paled. She has command over every wolf here." "No," Mira said quietly. "I have command over myself, and I'm letting their wolves choose." Rylan met her eyes. "We can end this without blood." "Only if they let us," she murmured. It happened slowly. One royal officer dropped his sword. Then 2 rebels lowered their bows. Then dozens, hundreds, until both armies stood frozen, weapon tips trembling against the cold earth. The king tried one last time. "Rylan," he hissed, "kill her." Rylan stepped in front of her. "No." For the first time in years, fear flickered across the king's face. Rylan swallowed. "Then what do you want, Mira?" She took Rylan's hand. Her voice was soft but carried like thunder. "An end to chains," she said. "All chains. Silver, royal, rebel. We walk out of this valley. No army follows. No bounty hunts. Anyone who tries." Silver flashed in her eyes. "I break." Silence followed. Then, slowly, one soldier fell to his knees. Then another. Then the rebels bowed too, not to Mira, not to Rylan, but to the choice for peace they'd never been offered before. Rylan exhaled shakily. "Did we just win?" "No," Mira whispered. "We just survived. And for now, that was enough." They turned away from 2 kneeling armies and walked toward the rising sun. 2 fugitives, 2 rebels, 2 halves of a prophecy rewritten by their own hands. If you want next chapter, the final showdown, or a romantic continuation, comment below where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe. Your support turns one moment of courage into an entire saga.